This is your daily dose of all things royal. Here's a fun fact to keep in your back pocket the next time a politician appears on a morning TV sofa to explain that the government's new face scanning regime is really deep down inside just about protecting those kids. So hear me out. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer spent the first half of his career as a human rights lawyer. Then he spent the second half running the Crown Prosecution Service. He has argued for the individual against the state, and he has aimed the full weight of the state right back at the individual. He has, in other words, seen this particular show from both seats. So when he tells you he has stumbled into the most comprehensive surveillance apparatus in British peacetime history, do not extend him the courtesy of believing it. He's a liar. He's not building this in his sleep. This has been in the works for a while and is lockstep with all the other realms that King Charles rules over. What is being built right now in the UK is a system where you must ask permission to exist online. And I don't mean asking the platform like X or Instagram. I mean asking the actual state. Before you read, post, store a photo, or send a text, you will now be expected to step up to a digital booth, show your papers or passport, and prove you are a citizen the government has pre-approved. Okay? Think about how profound that shift is. The default setting on a free society has always been that you are left alone until you give the state a reason to look at you. That is being flipped on its head at this moment in the UK. The new arrangement is that you are a suspect with a phone until you prove otherwise. And you have to prove it constantly because the verification is being welded directly onto the act of going online at all. And this is what the real goal is. Everything that we're seeing now is really just setting the narrative for what they're intending on doing. But if you want to understand how we got here, go ahead and hit that like button so we can continue on, because we need to talk about what just happened today.
There's a lot of children are watching your speech right now over our breakfast show. Will you be fining them if they go on social media? What's the jeopardy for them? And just quickly, what this means for freedom of speech. Is it the thin end of the wedge? Will a future government use the powers you're bringing in to ban people they don't like from social media?
Well, Chris, firstly, the enforcement will be on the platform providers, not on the children. I think it's really important that we make that clear. We're not going to start taking action against 13 and 14 and 15-year-olds who are trying, as they always will, to get around rules that adults put in their path. So this is absolutely aimed at those that are providing the circumstance, the platforms. On the question of free speech, I mean, let's be straight and honest about this. How many people in this room are prepared to defend adult strangers contacting children online? And we know what happens when that develops into the sort of abuse and worse. How many people are prepared to stand up and say, that's free speech and I wouldn't do anything about it? Any more than you'd say, we wouldn't take measures to stop that happening in the offline world. I think it's extraordinary that somehow we've got ourselves to a position where, until now, we've shrugged our shoulders. I genuinely think it's difficult to think in what circumstances any of us would put our children into a place where they could have, where unknown adults could have access to them without us knowing anything about it, one-to-one. We wouldn't do it. So it's not about free speech, it's about basic protection of children. And to take other examples, Chris, look, I'm a great advocate of free speech, I really am. But sending sexually explicit pictures to and from children, that's not free speech. That's basic protection. It's got nothing to do with technology. We have protected our children from that sort of harm for years in this country. We're right to do so. What we're doing now is making sure that it's fit for purpose in the world we actually live in. Thank you very much, Chris. I hope that satisfies some of the children or young people who are watching on your programme. And it'd be very interesting to see their reaction.
A big headline that was dropped today that's now been reported globally is Keir Starmer's announcement of a total ban on under 16s using social media. On the surface, the deception is for it to sound wholesome. It sounds like a community ribbon cutting where Royal shows up and smiles. Until you ask the obvious question that nobody that 10 Downing Street wants asked aloud, which is, how precisely do you stop a 14-year-old from opening Instagram without first checking the age of the 45-year-old? We all know you don't. You can't. So everyone has to be carded. Britain right now is carbon copying this idea from Australia, and it works in a very specific funnel. First, a computer scans your face and literally guesses your age from your cheekbones. If that fails, it then tracks your browsing habits and the hours you keep to predict your age. And then, when the algorithm inevitably throws up its hands, it simply demands your passport. And something tells me that there's going to be a lot of throwing up its hands to where they're going to be demanding your passport. The face scan is sold to everyone as the polite option. It is, in fact, part of the funnel. And at the bottom of that funnel sits a national identity check, because we all know that that's where they're going. Now, remember back in September of 2025, Starmer stood at a lectern and announced a mandatory digital ID scheme. He had the confidence of a man who assumed it would be wildly popular. The British public's response was to reach for the rhetorical equivalent of a baseball bat. Nearly 3 million signatures hit a single petition, the fourth biggest in parliamentary history. Even Starmer's own MPs started warning about an infrastructure that could track and link their most sensitive information. The entire nation pretty much told Starmer to shove it where the sun don't shine. One would think a normal politician would take that hint. But we're not dealing with normal. This psychopath did something else entirely. He kept the goal and ditched the honesty. The mandatory digital ID card was quietly dropped in January, but the ambition was not. The operation simply moved from the front door, which the public immediately rejected, to the illegal workers' side entrance around the back. This deception is quite sinister. You can't sell the public a surveillance Gestapo, so you stop calling it a surveillance crackdown. Instead, you attach it to causes that make opposition look like a personality defect, right? Push against protecting the kids, you are the bad one. Don't ask, may we build a national biometric database? Psh, because you know the answer is going to be no. Instead, deceive and say, would you like us to protect children from explicit images? And watch the exact same people who hated the ID card stupidly nod along because the alternative is being presented as the weirdo defending kids having access to adult sites. Which, by the way, is exactly where they ran the pilot scheme last July. Age checks went live for adult content. I don't know if people saw this, but traffic fell off a cliff by 77% as people switched to VPNs. But the public uprising amounted to roughly nobody because marching for your right to watch adult content is not a hill most people want to die on. This was definitely a test run. The strategy perfected, filed away, and immediately repeated. It's a classic case of what we call mission creep. First, they established a foothold by targeting adult websites. Okay. Next, they expanded their perimeter to encompass all social media. And this week, they advanced the front line straight into people's pockets. Apple and Google are now facing criminal liability unless they agree to install what is effectively state spyware to index your personal photo library. They changed the wrapper, guys, but it's the exact same surveillance Gestapo. So we're looking at 3 parts to this sinister strategy. The first part is knowing who you are. The second one is reading what you keep, and here the children conveniently evaporate because there's no cuddly justification for the third part. Remember, the Home Office had served Apple with a secret order to tear a hole in iCloud encryption. This was an order so secret that Apple was forbidden by law from even admitting they had received it. Think about the ambition there. This is a government wanting to force an American tech company to break encryption in secret, and then wanting the court case about the secret order to also be a secret. Apple told him kindly where to go and yanked its strongest encryption from British users entirely. The French, they still have that protection. The Germans, they still have it. The Americans absolutely still has it, but the British citizens do not. The government reached for one company's lock and ended up ripping the door off millions of citizens' phones. So now, looking deeper into part 3, which is the punishment, we all know that British police arrested over 12,000 people in a single year just for the things they typed online. That's more than 30 people a day, yet they only managed to convict fewer than 1 in 10 people. When the conviction rate is that weak, the arrest is the punishment. Now follow me here. The knock at the door and the phone sitting in an evidence bag does the work no courtroom ever will. Look at the statistics. Over 133,000 non-crime hate incidents have been logged since 2014, which is just the state's charming term for keeping a permanent file on something you said that wasn't actually illegal. It doesn't need to win in a court. It just needs to keep people nervous and in fear. So here you have these 3 parts that, when put together, paints a really dark and sinister picture. This is a government who wants to check who you are before you log on. They want to read what you store on your device. And they want to arrest you for what you say if it doesn't care for your tone or if it dissents away from the official narrative. Identity, surveillance, punishment. Each of those components are being ushered through this tear-jerking side door, while the prime minister, the next Hitler wannabe, puts his hand on his heart and says, I swear it's really about protecting the kids. Here's the really scary part to this, is that in the United States, we are subjected to the potential of this happening because on a state level, in blue states, they are driving forward with these age verification laws. Yeah, and the whole thing is so deceptive because when you look at these 3 individual pieces on its own, they all have different reasons for why they need it. But when you put them together, they quietly abolish the notion that a British adult can read, think, or speak online without the government's full knowledge and explicit say-so. And the thing that should scare everybody is that none of this will unbuild itself. It'll be very hard to remove all of this plumbing that they're laying down. And when you think about it, every future Home Secretary will inherit this encryption power. And every future government will inherit the identity plumbing and its speech laws, right? So this little ratchet tool has precisely only one direction once it gets laid. And Starmer, the former prosecutor, knows that better than anybody else because prosecutors are the people who get to turn it and drive it. Right? There are a lot of factors that play into this. Part of it is also enforcing the law. As is, police are aware of the current harms on social media, but they're not stopping or doing anything about it. Am I right? So we look at this and ask this question, are children at risk online? That's not the real question on the table. The real question is, should the government be able to identify, monitor, and punish every adult who uses the internet? That's the real question, folks. And it has already been answered by 3 million furious people in the UK, which is the entire reason they will never explicitly ask it again. So what are people going to do about this? I think first and foremost, remember that nobody voted for any of this. It wasn't in the manifesto. No party put facial scanning and identity checks to the electorate and won a mandate for it. We have started to see a lot of these protests erupting all over Europe, specifically in the UK, Northern Ireland, and I think that that's intentional. I think the intention is to give a reason for the UK government and the EU to crack down on social media and speech. Now, in my humble opinion, as an outsider looking in, I don't think any of these protests is going to make a difference aside from give justification to the UK government to crack down on speech or to crack down on social media. Now, what I think is a more effective way of protesting is taking those same protests and going to the doorstep of these politicians, the same politicians that have put these broken policies into effect and not doing anything to fix it. Look, I get people are angry and people are frustrated, but if you're going to take it to the street, take it to the street where Keir Starmer lives and make your voice heard. Take it to the street where 10 Downing Street is and make your voice heard. Burning buses and setting immigrant housing on fire only just fuels the justification for the government to crack down further, and it's not going to solve a thing. Over the next several weeks, I predict that we're going to see more ministers, as well as the state-controlled media, push the narrative about this being about keeping kids safe and that it's not about surveillance. They will tell you that anyone who objects to it must be on the side of not protecting kids. We all know that this is pure shit, and this same shit is what's happening here in the United States that people need to be vigilant and speak up on, okay? Falling for it means handing the government a machine it will never give back, just in exchange for a feeling or hurt feelings. The children are the reason you are being asked literally to stop thinking. They are not the reason this is being built, and we all know what that reason is. The moment to notice the difference is right now, while saying so still costs you nothing, and not later when it costs considerably more. I'm asking you to trust the kid here. I'm telling you what is going to happen if you do nothing. And this is not only directed to the people in the UK and all of King Charles's realms, because if you notice, it's all happening at the same time, this push for legislation. I'm telling my American viewers, we also have to pay attention to this, because God forbid another Democrat gets into office, we're going to be right alongside back into this shit again. And this time, they're going to make sure that our voices are taken away. I certainly do not want to knock on the door from the government because I commented and criticized Meghan Markle. You know what I mean? This is what they want. This was always what they wanted. Like, if I want to call Meghan Markle a lying scumbag, I should be free to do so without fear. But this is what they want. They want people in fear. Now more than ever, you have to put your trust in God, because that's the one thing that these people hate the most. They want you to worship them. They want you to turn your back on God and go down this evil satanic agenda that has people enslaved. This is not what God wanted for us. You know, it really makes me sad watching what's going on in the UK. Communism has crept in. People don't want to admit that, but it has. The days of free and fair elections in Europe is over. Look at what the left has done here in the United States. Everything that we see corrupted is no doubt taking place over in Europe. You know, and I have to say that it is disappointing that the king hasn't done a thing to support his people. Like, we're past this being political. This is about the suffering of people. And for it to go on and for it to be allowed, I think it's disgusting. Yeah, and remember, this is not just happening in the UK. It's also happening in Canada. It's also happening in Australia. You mean to tell me that all of King Charles's realms just so happen to have the same problems going on simultaneously? You've been conditioned to believe that he's not involved, but he is. You know, I hate to break that reality to you, but that's the fact. He's involved. If the royals are not political, then why the need to pass a law after the Black Spider memos exposed Charles writing to government officials to influence decisions, right? This law is to prevent or exclude disclosure of royal family members' communications with government officials. Why the need then? Yeah, I think people need to wake up and see the influence that this family really has on the West. But that's just my take on it. Like, is Charles or the royal family going to come to the Brits' rescue when full totalitarian control takes over? I doubt it. And we're supposed to believe that these two lying scumbags are not here in the United States doing the work at the behest of the UK government on behalf of the crown? Give me a break, folks. Remember, thanks to Daily Empress, this is a farce. Anyhow, let me know your thoughts on this and comment below. Do you think the pushback will force another retreat, or do you think this approach is going to work this time? It sure feels like it's working in the UK. If you want to help push this video past the standard media algorithm, drop a like for me and share it with one person who needs to see it. That's all I got. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
It was such a